So let me now move on to another very interesting area. Perhaps not many people have noticed this. So in a recent article, you wrote about the overvaluation of the Sri Lankan rupee. And you interestingly coined the term the silent killer of an economy. So I would like to know, can you help me understand what this who this silent killer is and what he has been doing to our economy?
Well, it's important to first understand this concept of overvaluation. The concept is basically this, that when Sri Lanka's inflation is higher than inflation, let's say, in the US or in Sri Lanka's competitor countries, then the currency must depreciate to adjust. So supposing Sri Lanka's inflation is 10%, US inflation is 5%, there's a 5% differential. Then the rupee to the dollar must actually depreciate by that 5% to compensate. So we're compensating for actually Sri Lanka's relative inefficiency. Now, we made a calculation where what we did was we took the inflation rates of Sri Lanka's competitors. US is not a competitor of Sri Lanka. It produces other products. But the countries that produce similar products to Sri Lanka are obviously other South Asian countries and some East Asian countries. So we have to look at their inflation and the movement of their currencies against the US dollar and compare that with Sri Lanka's inflation and the movement of the rupee against the dollar. We came to the conclusion that when you did that, we saw that Sri Lankan rupee was about 50 to 60% overvalued, meaning that it had lost this competitiveness. Now, what this provoked was an outrage where people said, are you now saying we should depreciate by 50%?
Precisely what I was going to ask you.
And the answer is no. This is an indication of how more inefficient Sri Lankan producers are. Now, it doesn't mean to say that they're lazy and slothful and so on. It just means that when we look at all the entire structure of production and unit costs of production, it means Sri Lankan unit costs are 50% higher than our competitors. If we were to depreciate, it's actually by 50%, it's not going to do very much because we don't have the competitiveness to take advantage. All we would get is immediate inflation. You remember, like we said earlier, what caused the inflation in Sri Lanka? The currency depreciation,
That played a major part.
And the same thing would happen if we just simply tried to depreciate in order to recapture the competitiveness. No country has ever been able to do that. What you have to do is first improve the productive efficiency, and that we can discuss separately. Once you create an improved competitiveness, then currency depreciation can assist exporters, can assist import-competing producers.
So essentially what you mean is even before we send out a single unit of product from Sri Lanka, we are 50% uncompetitive to our similar product-producing nations.
Exactly.
So you also offered how to fix that in the short term as well. But would that be sufficient? Because we are a nation which is hungry for US dollars from exports. We need dollars immediately. So what is the quick fix to this issue? I'm sure, and I get your point that you can't depreciate the currency by 50% again. And I mean, that will create a disaster. So you told just now what are the medium to long-term fixes to that. But what we are looking at is getting more dollar income flows via exports. So if our existing product base is in current form is 50% uncompetitive, what can we do right now?
Actually, there are lots of things that we can do. Other countries have done it. There are incentives that we can give to our producers, tax incentives, subsidies, etc., etc. Recently, I've read an article, actually it's quoting a government minister saying that these incentives have not worked. They've just allowed a number of Sri Lankan companies to vegetate and draw profits doing nothing. Now, that could be true. I'm not sure that that's entirely true. I think it was just to justify removing lots of the subsidies and incentives that were given to Sri Lankan producers. But if that is true, there's a very easy solution which has been adopted by many, many other countries that have tried to promote their exports and import substituting producers, and that is having time-bound incentives and targets. So we're going to give you an incentive, but you have to meet these targets. And you have to meet it within a certain time frame. If you don't, and there's no good reason that you give me why you haven't reached those targets, we withdraw the support. So I don't understand why that can't be implemented. Instead, what we've had is the government saying, no, there's an easy way to make companies more competitive. We eliminate all the subsidies and support, and we throw them into the fire, as it were. And so the fire is a free trade agreement.
Right. We will get to that in a moment, Dr. Howard. So I think the government support can come from different ways, through subsidies and through tax concessions and through less regulations and so on and so forth. I think most of these things that we talked about, especially the tax concessions which were enjoyed by these industries, were taken away last year and last 2 years. When we had to increase the taxes to fix the budget. That's actually totally a separate subject that we should revisit and we should talk about separately on another day. Until then, actually, I invite who watch this program to go and read that article. If you will be able to find that article on the internet, I believe, Dr. Howard. If you search saying overvaluation of the Sri Lankan rupee and type the silent killer, I'm sure that you will be able to find that article. And there were 2 articles which were written back in January and March. So I invite all of you who watch us today to go back and read those 2 articles. And we are surely revisit this topic because it is such an important topic because the thing is, it is slowly and smoothly killing us, it seems.
Yes.